Okay, welcome back. I'm Richard Paterson, drum teacher at the ICMP Music School in London. And joining me is Jane Gregory, who's our in-house Alexander technique expert at the Institute. Now, last week, Jane told us that our skull should balance on a central spine, and we're to do nothing to interfere with that. And we're to balance our head very freely when we play so that we don't need to use any tension in the neck muscles, which is unnecessary and will waste energy and get in the way of our playing. So Jane, what are we going to talk about this week?
Great, Rich. Yes, this week we're going to look at slouching. I've noticed with a lot of the drummers that I work with, when they go forward to the kit, rather than using the hip joints to go forward, they slouch forward like this. And really, the reason it happens is that most drummers aren't really aware of their hip joints. Now, the hip joints are a very, very important joint in the body, and I'm going to use my very small but perfectly formed skeleton here to illustrate this point. When you look at the skeleton in a side view, you will notice that the middle of this whole structure is the hip joint. So what I mean by that is from head to hip joint is one piece, and from hip joint down to the feet is part two. And those two parts are relatively the same length. So that makes the hip joint pretty significant because it's right in the center. And drummers should be using the hip joint more significantly. So when you're moving at the kit, you should be moving from the hip joints. And that keeps the spine as one integrated unit. So what I'd like to do now, Rich, is use you as our demonstration model and get you, first of all, to demonstrate bad use of, or rather non-use of the hip joints.
Okay.
Yeah, so you're going to slouch forward to the kit for us. That's it. And if you had to reach another part of the kit, that's right. So that's just an illustration of not using the hip joints at all. Very good.
Yep.
All right, so we're going to come back to sitting up nice and straight. And now, instead, we're just going to watch Rich as he hinges towards the kit.
Okay.
That's it. So very, very good. Let's show the difference again for the drummers by slouching one more time. And I want to point out, last month we looked at how the head balances on the top of the spine. And there's absolutely no way you'd be able to balance your head when you're in this position. I think you can see that. It's really quite difficult when your body is slouched. So we're going to come back up once more. And let's just show the drummers one more time, hinging from the hip joints to come forward to the kit. Very nice.
You actually find you have a lot more reach as well if you do things this way.
Yes.
So you're not curling your back. If you have multiple tom setups, that results in your cymbals being further away. This is the best way to get to them without without it all curling your back over, which will, again, that'll use up energy, won't it? It
will use up energy, and in fact, when the body is slouching forward and the head isn't balancing, we're back to square one, aren't we, with energy? We're using so much energy to keep the 10-pound weight of the head held up that we don't have enough energy left for playing.
So Jane, what can we do to stop slouching on the drum kit?
Right, okay, well let's do a little illustration for the drummers to show how we can do this. I'm going to ask you first to just have a really good slouch. Right, and now bring yourself upright. And I want you to think about which muscles you're actually using to do that. Do it a couple of times so that you're quite aware where the muscle effort is coming from.
From the back?
Yes.
And the shoulders maybe as well?
Very good, yes, that's right. That's where most drummers are using too much energy to pull themselves up into an upright position, when in fact it makes much more sense to make the front of the body longer instead. So if you just slouch again, rather than using these muscles and winching yourself up, which you then have lots of tension that you'll have to hold on to for the rest of the day, it's better to say, well, hang on, what about if I lengthen these muscles here in the front of the body? So just letting them get a little bit longer, that's it. It won't feel quite as upright as when you really, really use your back, but it'll be far more natural and it'll be far easier for you to maintain. How does that feel, Rich?
Brilliant. In fact, it's something that's quite important because often in the class, if we're doing some technique exercises and I look around the students and I might shout just the word posture to the students, they immediately seem to bolt up, and it's almost as if they're doing the opposite. They're actually putting more tension into
They
the
are.
way they're sitting, throwing their shoulders back. So that's a really good tip to think about how to hold a better posture without completely using all the muscles and locking up in a way. So really that's not giving the desired effect of reducing any unnatural tension at all. That's giving us loads more. So if we think about what you said, lengthening
Right.
the front, that's the best way to get into a good drumming position, I think.
Yes, and I think also another thing to just give you a little bit of a tip is that if you feel that your back muscles are starting to ache, the chances are you are holding yourself up from behind again. So it's a good idea to just let the alarm bells go off and allow yourself to think up in the front again. And that should alleviate it.
Good. So maybe last week's tip, practicing with a mirror. Practice
Yes.
with mirrors around you. You can keep on using them as a reference to see what you're doing, or even film yourself playing. Check the video, see what happens. See what happens when you go for a fill. See if you're hinging from your waist, curling your spine back to reach out to your toms and your cymbals, or are you actually hinging to get that extra reach, and all the time keeping your spine very straight so that there's no tension or crumpling of the spine ever coming into action.
And just remember about the hip joints. The hip joints are the middle of the body, the true middle. So when you're moving, you really just let the legs do the work. At the kit, it's slightly different because, of course, you're using your arms as well. But remembering that that is the center of the body is a really key point.
Okay, so to summarize what we've talked about today, Jane has a checklist for you drummers to think about when you're behind the kit.
Quite easy. There's only two things. Don't slouch. And if you don't want to slouch, you need to use the hip joints more effectively to move forwards and backwards. And also, don't hold yourself up from the back. Don't hold yourself up at all from the back. Allow the front of the body to lengthen. And that's it.
Brilliant. Good luck.